Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're digging into Dignitas Infinita.
That's right. It's a major new declaration from the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith.
Basically, the Vatican's main office for clarifying church teaching. And this one, well, it goes right to the core of what it means to be human, our dignity.
Precisely. We're going to really unpack the main ideas in this document. We'll look at how it defines human dignity and then get into some of the, frankly, serious ways that dignity is challenged today.
Yeah, and this wasn't something just quickly put together, was it?
No, not at all. It took years of drafting, lots of experts weighed in, and Pope Francis himself was directly involved.
Which really signals how central this topic is for the church.
Absolutely. So our mission here, if you like, is to get a solid grasp on human dignity as De Dignis Infinita presents it, and sort of understand what it means for us, for society.
Okay, and the declaration itself is laid out pretty clearly, right? Foundational ideas first.
Exactly. Principles first, then it clarifies the term dignity itself, and then it looks at current violations.
Got it. So let's dive into that foundational piece. This idea that every single person has infinite dignity, dignitas infinita.
Yes, and crucially, this dignity isn't something you earn, and it's not something you can lose. It's inalienable.
Meaning it's just part of being human.
Exactly. Rooted in our very being. It doesn't matter what circumstances you're in, what you've done, what's happened to you, that dignity remains.
And this obviously connects to the importance of the human person protecting human rights.
It's the absolute foundation for that, yes. And of course, it ties directly into the church's theology.
The whole idea of being created in God's image and likeness and then redeemed by Christ.
Precisely. That theological understanding gives this inherent worth a profound depth.
The Declaration also connects this to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights from 1948, doesn't it?
It does, explicitly. It sees that declaration as reaffirming this unique value of every person. And with the recent 75th anniversary, it's like the church is saying, okay, let's really double down on this conviction.
Now, the document does something interesting. It breaks down dignity into 4 different kinds or aspects. Can you walk us through those?
Sure, it's quite helpful, actually. First, there's ontological dignity.
Ontological.
Yeah, that's the big one, the most fundamental. It comes just from being human. It's indelible, can't be erased, ever.
Okay, so that's inherent. What's next?
Then you have moral dignity. This relates to how we act, how we use our freedom.
Ah, so you can act in ways that aren't dignified.
Exactly. Someone might do terrible things, and we'd say they lack moral dignity in their actions. But, and this is key, it doesn't touch their underlying ontological dignity.
Okay, so even someone who commits awful crimes still possesses that basic human worth.
That's precisely the point. And it has huge implications for how we view justice, punishment, rehabilitation. You still have to recognize the person's fundamental humanity.
Right. What's the third type?
Social dignity. This is about the conditions people live in.
Like poverty.
Exactly. Extreme poverty, lacking basic necessities, those conditions can be described as undignified. But again, it doesn't erase the person's inherent ontological dignity.
That's a really important distinction. And the last one?
Existential dignity. This is more about our subjective experience living with peace, joy, hope.
So suffering can make life feel undignified.
Yes. Facing severe illness, violence, maybe displacement. Those hardships can make life feel undignified, even though that core ontological dignity is still fully intact. These 4 categories help us be more precise.
Yeah, that makes sense. The Declaration also brings up a classical definition of a person, individual substance of a rational nature. Sounds a bit dense.
It does, but it's quite profound. It comes from Boethius. The individual substance part points to that ontological dignity we just talked about, our unique, separate existence.
Okay, and the rational nature part.
That covers the whole spectrum of what makes us human, not just reasoning, but knowing, loving, choosing, desiring. Even our physical being is tied into that.
So what about someone who can't maybe actively use all those abilities, like an unborn child or someone unconscious?
That's a critical point the Declaration makes. Their dignity isn't based on demonstrating those capacities right now. It's based on their nature as a human being. So yes, their dignity is complete and inalienable from conception to natural death.
Okay. Now, the document also looks back a bit at how this idea of dignity developed. It mentions classical antiquity.
Right. Back then, dignitas was often, tied more to social rank or status. There were thinkers who valued human reason, sure, but The idea of a dignity belonging equally to everyone wasn't really there yet.
But the Bible really shifts that perspective, doesn't it?
Absolutely, it's foundational. You start with Genesis, created in the image and likeness of God.
That's huge.
It is. It gives humanity this unique, almost sacred quality beyond just the material. And crucially, the Declaration says this dignity is bestowed by God. It's a gift, not something we earn.
And we see this playing out in the Old Testament.
Oh, definitely. Think about God hearing the cry of the poor in Exodus. Think about the laws protecting the vulnerable widows, orphans, foreigners.
And the prophets.
Exactly. Prophets like Amos, Isaiah, they're constantly condemning injustice, calling out the failure to see the worth of the poor, the marginalized. Even the Psalms often connect faith with defending the needy.
And then with Jesus, this understanding deepens even further.
Massively. Jesus himself, born into poverty, consistently highlights the dignity of those society overlooked: the sick, the poor, sinners, women.
He broke down barriers.
He did. Healing, feeding, identifying himself with the least of these, as he says in Matthew's gospel. How we treat others becomes for him the measure of everything.
And Paul continues this.
Yes, Paul emphasizes living with dignity and respecting others, all centered on that new commandment of love. So you see this strong thread running right through Scripture.
Then the Declaration traces how Christian thinkers built on this. Church fathers, Aquinas in the Middle Ages, the Renaissance.
Yeah, it maps out that development. The fathers focused on the image of God. Aquinas gave it a strong philosophical, metaphysical grounding with the concept of the person. The Renaissance highlighted human potential. Later thinkers, even outside theology like Descartes or Kant, contributed ideas about subjectivity, reason, autonomy.
And then in the 20th century, personalism comes in.
Exactly. Personalism really stressed the unique value of the individual, but also our connectedness, our relationships, intersubjectivity. That's really influenced the modern Catholic understanding.
So bringing it to today, how does the Declaration summarize our current understanding of dignity?
It says that today, dignity primarily means the unique, incomparable worth of every single human person. That's the sense used on the 1948 UN Declaration, linking dignity directly to rights.
And it hammers home that this dignity isn't granted by anyone else.
Absolutely crucial point. It's not based on qualities, skills, or social approval. If it were granted, it could be withdrawn.
But it can't be.
It can't. It's intrinsic. It's there before anyone recognizes it. And it can't be lost, even if the person can't express it or isn't aware of it.
The Second Vatican Council in the 60s was also important here, wasn't it? Emphasizing the sublime dignity of the human person.
Very much so. Vatican II noted this growing global awareness of dignity, fueling demands for freedom and justice. The Church has progressively affirmed that this dignity holds true in all circumstances. No exceptions.
Okay, so then the Declaration talks about the Church's specific role in promoting and protecting this dignity. It mentions 3 core convictions.
Right. The first is that indelible image of God in every person. Dignity flows from the Creator's love imprinted on us body and soul, calling us into relationship with God and others.
Makes sense. The second.
That Christ elevates human dignity. Through the incarnation, God becoming human, Christ showed the immeasurable worth of every single person just by being part of the human family.
And his actions really showed that.
Absolutely. His focus on the marginalized, the forgotten, that powerfully demonstrates this inherent value.
And the third conviction.
Our shared vocation to the fullness of dignity. Christ's resurrection points to our ultimate destiny, communion with God. So our dignity now is linked to that future glory.
But it's not just passive, right? We have a role in living out this dignity.
Exactly. The dignity itself is a gift. It's irrevocable. But living it fully, realizing it, that involves our free choices.
The image and likeness distinction.
Precisely. The image of God is always there. The likeness is something we grow into by choosing good, choosing truth. Sin can wound our dignity, obscure that likeness, the Declaration says, but it can never cancel the fundamental image.
And faith helps us see this dignity more clearly.
Yes, faith helps us perceive its true depth.
So this isn't just theology. It's the foundation for rights, for how we relate to each other.
Absolutely. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is a key milestone there. And this new declaration insists our respect for dignity must be unconditional.
Not based on intelligence or ability.
No, just based on being human, period.
The document also warns against misusing the word dignity, maybe to justify new rights that conflict with fundamental ones, like the right to life.
Yes, it raises that concern. It argues dignity is rooted in objective human nature, not just subjective wants or social agreement. It also stresses we're relational beings. Dignity isn't just about me, it's about recognizing duties and rights between us.
Interestingly, it reserves dignity for humans, but still talks about caring for creation.
Right. Other creatures have their own value, their own goodness, and our dignity includes the responsibility to be good stewards of the environment, of the whole human ecology.
And there's a point about freedom needing to be freed.
Yeah, freed from negative influences, from the pull towards evil. True freedom, it suggests, needs a connection to truth and goodness, ultimately to God. And society has a role here too, creating just conditions so people can exercise freedom authentically.
Okay, this brings us to the really tough part,
Yeah.
the fourth section, which tackles grave violations of human dignity today.
It's a stark list, drawing on Vatican II and recent popes. It condemns attacks on life itself, murder, genocide, abortion, euthanasia, suicide. Also violations of integrity, torture, coercion. And offenses against dignity, like subhuman living conditions, arbitrary imprisonment, as a violation of that inalienable dignity.
Then it highlights some key areas. First, poverty.
It frames extreme poverty and the vast inequality of wealth as a direct denial of dignity. It cites John Paul II and Francis, noting how poverty takes many forms now, like lack of work, which deeply wounds a person's sense of worth.
War is next. A tragedy, always.
Always a defeat for humanity, as the popes have said. It attacks dignity through death, injury, destruction, long-term trauma. The Declaration strongly questions the idea of a just war today and condemns using religion to justify violence.
The plight of migrants is also central.
Yes, migrants often face denial of dignity both in the places they flee and on their journeys. The text stresses their inherent worth and our duty to welcome them.
And human trafficking, condemned in the strongest terms.
Pope Francis calls it vile, a crime against humanity. Organ trafficking, sexual exploitation, forced labor, it dehumanizes everyone involved, victims and traffickers.
Sexual abuse is named as causing deep wounds.
Profound, lasting wounds to the dignity of survivors. The Church's commitment to prevention and support is reaffirmed.
Violence against women, a global scandal.
Absolutely. The gap between talk of equality and the reality of discrimination, unequal pay, coercive abortion, polygamy, femicide, it's starkly presented.
Abortion is addressed directly.
Reaffirming the Church's consistent teaching, the intrinsic dignity of every human from conception, making abortion a grave moral wrong. It warns against using ambiguous terms to obscure this.
Surrogacy is called deplorable.
Yes, seen as violating the dignity of both the woman, often exploited, and the child, treated potentially as an object and denied a fully human origin.
Euthanasia and assisted suicide, a misuse of dignity.
That's the argument. Suffering doesn't negate dignity. The Declaration opposes ending life, emphasizing palliative care instead.
What about people with disabilities?
Their dignity comes from being loved by God, period. It calls for full inclusion and participation, challenging limitations imposed by society.
Then it gets into some very debated topics. Gender theory.
It starts by affirming respect for everyone, regardless of sexual orientation. But it raises critical issues with gender theory, especially when it denies the significance of biological sex difference, seeing that difference as a gift. It worries about ideological colonization.
It stresses the link between biological sex and gender.
Yes, distinct but inseparable. It calls for accepting our created reality.
And sex change interventions.
The dignity of the body is part of the person's dignity. So it says these interventions, as a rule, risk threatening the unique dignity received at conception, though it acknowledges medical procedures for genital abnormalities are different.
Finally, digital violence, a modern problem.
A very real one. Fake news, cyberbullying, online exploitation, isolation technology can harm dignity. It calls for ensuring tech serves humanity and peace.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, it's worth remembering this came out around the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Exactly, and Pope Francis really urged a renewed commitment to those rights. Dignitas Infinita powerfully argues that respecting human dignity must be central to law, politics, everything.
Because that recognition of inherent dignity, that's the foundation for rights, for a just society.
And it's a shared responsibility. Individuals, communities, states, we all have a part to play in making dignity real for everyone, and states must protect it and create conditions where it can flourish.
The declaration ends on a note of hope, quoting Pope Francis, urging us never to forget our inherent dignity, something no one can ever take away.
Which really leaves us, and you listening, with something to think about. Considering all these violations we've discussed, poverty, war, trafficking, discrimination, and so on, which one do you think is most overlooked in our world today? And maybe more personally, what's one concrete thing you can do this week to better recognize and uphold the dignity of someone you encounter? Something to reflect on.